Good morning, everyone. My name is Rima Nashishibi, and I'm founder and president of Global Health 365, a 501c3 nonprofit whose goal is to end harmful practices against women and girls, such as child marriage, human trafficking, and other forms of gender-based violence. Please post your questions in the chat. Ali Riza is going to help us with those, remind us when it's time, but also the speakers were so gracious and they indicated that they will answer your questions during their presentations. Just use the raise your hand and I will monitor that. Both Ali Riza and myself will monitor that and we'll go to you for questions. I see that some of the attendees have worked or still working at the UN for the longest time. We have attendees from various countries, and thank you all for attending. With us today is Ms. Ghida Anani, who's the founding executive director of Abad, a resource center for gender equality in Lebanon, and Troy Anderson, who's the founder and international director of Speak Up for the Poor, advocacy for girls living in poverty. Now, Troy joins us from Bangladesh. And so depending on the internet connection there, Dave Palmer, who's the director of development for Speaker for the Poor, will basically run with that conversation if we have issues with the internet connections in Bangladesh. So thank you both for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Sure. So Ghida, if you don't mind, if you can unmute. So we will go directly into the topic of this coffee meetup. And that is girls' education and child marriage. So we will start with Ghida. Ghida, what is the situation on the ground in Lebanon and the MENA region? And then we will hear from Troy about Bangladesh. But before they start, let's talk about, I'm going to launch a poll and I would love for all of you to take just a minute for all of you to answer that poll. And let's see what all your answers. We're gonna give you 1 minute, 30 seconds to answer the poll. In the meantime, there are 800. Okay, I see the answers. Okay, let me answer some of them. So how many in modern day slavery today? According to the ILO most recent report, which was issued 5 days ago, it's 50 million. So the correct answer is 50 million. And that's 28 million in forced labor and 22 in forced marriage. And globally, under the age of 18, women and girls who are alive today under the age of 18, who were married under the age of 18 and alive today, they are 850 million. So that's the majority had that answer, yes. So it's women and girls who are alive today and married under the age of 18 are 850 million. And yes, you answered the current economic crisis in Lebanon, did it increase early forced marriage? The correct answer is yes. And which country has the highest rate of under 15 in child marriage? It's equal between India and Bangladesh. However, the correct answer is Bangladesh. And so thank you for participating in this poll. And now let's hear from Ghida Anani from Abad in Lebanon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rima. And thank you everyone for joining this conversation, which is quite, I think, timely. With the current crisis that we're all, I think, living around the globe, but specifically in Lebanon and Bangladesh and some other countries. Of course, reflecting on the situation on the ground today, women and girls in Lebanon being from Lebanon or being on the Lebanese territory, coming from Syria or Palestine or Iraq or other countries, are quite living and struggling with being the most vulnerable due to the multi-layered crisis that we're currently living. That quite had an impact on the education per se. Lebanon, was among the countries where we had the lowest rate of dropout, school dropout or illiteracy. With the crisis that we were living in since especially 2019, with the so-called the revolution or the uprising that was followed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and then combined with the tragic blast, the Beirut port blast, and then that is all that piled up with the economic and financial crisis and the banking system collapse, this is coming all to be combined with the already complex situation in the country that we had earlier, struggling with corruption, struggling with confessionalism, struggling with a system of no system that I like usually to call, with the lack of protection system. That is put all the aspect of vulnerability, of course, like any other humanitarian crisis, being man-made or being natural or being even armed conflict, women and girls are the most affected. So today, if we want to speak about the situation of women and girls, struggling with all aspects of discrimination that is stemming from already the like legal system, and then the administrative system. And you can imagine if there's no functional government. So today, even women and girls are not able to access their basic rights when it comes to even being civil rights or being a citizen. They're affected on the level of their healthcare, on the level of education, on the level of protection, and being subject to multiple forms of gender-based violence, being sexual or even family violence or spousal violence, or even we're witnessing a lot of cases of femicide. That's per se. Okay, so sorry, I'm gonna have to just shut down the video because of the connectivity also in Lebanon, if that is okay, just temporarily. So that is to be to say that the issue of marriage per se, being forced or being early marriage, this is interrelated with today the survival mode that the family is living in. So if there's economic ability to send school or to send their children to school, it's basically the prioritization is given based on gender. So there's a lot of school dropout. There is inability to access the education system anyway because of the struggle of schools to be operational, to be functional, to have fuel, to have electricity. And of course, with the pandemic, the issue of online and distant learning, like the online education, was also a big challenge for families, for parents, and for children per se. That all resulted today impacting on the dynamic of marriages, being forced or being early marriage per se.
Thank you so much, Rida. From what I understand, from a report that I read by UNICEF, that the prevalence of child marriage in Lebanon varies by nationality. So according to that baseline survey, it indicates that 6% of Lebanese girls and women aged 20 to 24 were married before the age of 18, compared to 12% of Palestinian refugees from Lebanon and 25% of Palestinian refugees from Syria and 40% of Syrian refugees. So So that, according to what UNICEF indicated, as far as the
Yeah.
child marriage situation in Lebanon. Now, before Troy starts, I just want to talk about, compare that to child marriage in the US. What most of you don't know is that child marriage is legal still in 43 states in the United States, and California is one of them. And in California and 7 other states, not only is it legal, there is 0 minimum age. In California, all what you need is parental consent and judicial approval. There has been 300,000 minors that were married in the US between 2000 and 2018, according to the most recent research, mostly girls, young girls married to adult men. 23,588 were married in California. 60,000 of those 300,000 would have been considered a sex crime because of the age differential between the young girl and the husband, abuser, perpetrator, whatever we want to call them. And so I wanted to put that into context that not only does child marriage happen overseas, but it happens also here in the US. And the US Department of State issued a report in 2016 indicating that child marriage is human rights abuse in other countries. And I say, what about our country? What about our kids? We need to protect our kids here in the US too. And that's why we are advocating to end child marriage in various states, including California. And while we're waiting for state elected officials to pass that legislation in California, we've been passing a resolution indicating no child marriage under 18, no exceptions in various cities and counties. We passed it unanimously in 12 out of 34 cities in Orange County and in Culver City. And I know the attorney with us here, Wafa Hubballah, has been instrumental and is trying to connect me with both the city and the county of Los Angeles. So again, I wanted to put that in perspective. Now let's go to Bangladesh, Troy, before the internet goes bad on us there. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Rima. I'm glad to be here, and good to meet everyone. And I hope this can be helpful for you to understand this part of the world. So not many people that I've met in my international travels have ever been to Bangladesh. And I think it's helpful to even just try to get your mind around Bangladesh, so the statistics I'm going to give will make sense. So Bangladesh has about 170 million people, which is the 8th largest country by population in the world. But it's a very small country. So it's about the size of a mid-sized state in the United States. So imagine if you took half of the US population, put them all in Louisiana, and 98% of those people were poor. That's what you would get. That's Bangladesh, a very poor country, a low-lying country that's the river delta from the major rivers flowing from India and China. So it's susceptible to flooding, to the cyclones during the monsoon season in particular, and a very high rate of poverty. So with that massive overcrowding and massive poverty, Bangladesh is one of the centers, the epicenters of child marriage in the world. Now, India, right next door to us in Bangladesh, has a much higher absolute number of child marriages because India has 6 times the population of Bangladesh. But Bangladesh has a higher rate of child marriage because it's poor per capita. So the statistics are that Bangladesh, about 60% of girls and young women are married before the age of 18. Most of the UN and other NGO statistics are extrapolated backwards from surveys of women in their 20s, and they can kind of calculate back to see how many were married under the age of 18. So Bangladesh, perhaps 60 to 65% of women are married under the age of 18, which is one of the highest, perhaps 3rd or 4th in the entire world, behind only like Niger and Chad, perhaps Central African Republic. Bangladesh has the absolute highest rate of child marriage under the age of 15. So in that 15 to 18 range, there's some slight deviance, but Bangladesh has a much higher rate under age 15 than anywhere in the world. That's likely because of a lot. Bangladesh is 92% Muslim. And there's and although the child marriage rates tend to be similar between Hindu and Muslim populations in Bangladesh, in my understanding, there's some of the, probably because of both religions, that are pushing the child marriage rate down below age 15 in many cases. So Bangladesh is predominantly a rural country, even though it's very highly populated. You have some major cities, but the majority of people live in villages. They say Bangladesh has 30,000 villages. So our organization's now working in 35 slums and villages. So we've got about 1% covered. But there's mass poverty where, because of the combination of a low view of women and girls and poverty, which reduces people's options in life, that the majority of girls are married before the age of 18. So we work, and I can tell later about our organization, but we work in these villages and slums around this area through education, keeping girls in school so that they can escape that reality here in Bangladesh.
Thank you, Troy Anderson, for that summary. And from my research on the topic for this coffee meetup, I came across a few statistics, and one of them is that 64% of women currently aged 20 to 24 were married before the age of 18. That's despite the fact that the minimum legal age of marriage for females in Bangladesh is 18 and 21 for male. And that the Dhaka Tribune on August 15 of this year had an article that at least, and you and I were talking about this beforehand, they say that at least slightly over 47,000 child marriages took place across the country amid the COVID-19 pandemic last year. Both you and I talked that it's at a much higher figure. And the report by the Monitoring and Evaluation Wing of the Directorate of Secondary and Higher Education revealed information on the media on Monday that included data of over 11,000 secondary schools across the country. They also stated that 4.8 million students did not participate in the annual examination that you have in Bangladesh, and that over 77,000 children became involved in child labor in the meantime. The report also went into the different, as you said, they had over 30,000 villages. They go through which village has the highest number of absentia from school and from the others. So at this time, I would like to thank one of our major sponsors, and that's Daryl C. Sheets. Daryl is the attorney for the nonprofit, and without whose financial support, we would not be able to continue our work, and we thank him for that. Yes, thank you. Monthly support. We thank him for that. So now let's go back to you, Troy. I would like to hear about what made you basically launch Speak Up for the Poor. What drove you to do it? What is your passion? I want to know more about Troy, and then we'll talk later about the work that you do in Bangladesh.
Yeah, so I started the organization actually when I was a law student. I'm a lawyer myself, so I can talk on some of the legal stuff too. So the law is 18 for girls in Bangladesh, but it's regularly just ignored. So the law is pretty much meaningless if it's not enforced. But yeah, I started Speak Up when I was a law student because I grew up in many different countries. My parents were international teachers, and I had a lot of international experience. And then right before law school, I did some travel in Thailand and India. And then during law school, I back to those countries and was volunteering with some organizations that were working on issues of human trafficking and forced prostitution. What really struck me personally was witnessing I actually went into some of the brothels in Burma and Thailand and India. I was kind of recruited, I guess, by these organizations to be an undercover sex tourist, for lack of a better term, to go in with a hidden camera to see some of these brothels where there were minor girls, particularly in Thailand and Burma. one summer also in India. And basically, like, these issues, I grew up thinking I knew about the world, but kind of by learning about human trafficking, these things, it opened my mind to something that I really didn't know was so prevalent and just so disturbing. It also just really broke my heart. There was nothing that really had captured my imagination or my emotion. I mean, it was really disturbing to go into these kind of places. And so because I was so moved by what I saw, I had already wanted to go to law school to be an advocate for the poor in some sense, but because of my experiences seeing that just deep depravity in these brothels, seeing young girls, especially I saw some Burmese girls that were probably 9 or 10 years old that were being prostituted. And it was so shocking and disturbing to me. It motivated me to want to do something. So that kind of helped shape my path as a law student. So I spent some time on those issues and with some organizations, volunteering and interning. And that led me to set up an organization that I thought one day I might use if I didn't find someone who wanted to hire me as an attorney. So then basically after law school, I spent a little time, I worked actually as a DA in Los Angeles County for a couple of years, paying off my loans a little bit and kind of just getting my feet under me until I figured out what to do. But I left that after a few years because I knew what I really wanted to do was be an advocate in some of these situations that were so desperate, where you need people, you need men and women, you need foreigners, Americans, whoever, everyone working together. And I thought my skills in particular I could use to help fight on these issues. But really, like, my experience in the brothel, seeing some young girls being prostituted really grabbed me and is something that still kind of drives me today. But over time, we then moved from being more about the legal side of things, more kind of interventions and brothels and stuff. And over time, I realized that what we needed to do was more on the preventative side, that was where I thought most of the money and effort needed to go. And so when we started working in Bangladesh, we do fund a home for girls, and we still work to help get some girls out of brothels. But I realized that I wanted to put more of my time into some of the preventative side, which led us to start our education program, which is our flagship program now.
Thank you, Troy. Yes, similar with Global Hope 365, we do not provide direct services to victims/survivors. We're into education, raising awareness, education, and prevention, because we don't want anyone to go through the trauma either of early forced marriage or human trafficking, including sex trafficking, because that trauma will never leave you for the rest of your life. And according to what you said about the age of the young girls and the brothels, I sit on a weekly meeting with staffers from the Hill, that is members of Congress, every Friday at 11:30. And we had a report in one of those meetings about the country of the Philippines. And it was indicated that the average age of individuals in the sex trafficking industry is 11. And there were cases where it was a 6-month-old baby. And so so it is disheartening, it's shocking. That's why I try to walk at least 5 miles a day, because as you know, Troy, and as you know, Rita, and everybody who's involved in this, it's a very stressful, emotional job that we're in. And so our energy, frustration, sadness, anger needs to be channeled in a positive way. That's my escape, is walking at least 5 miles a day. Now let's go to Rita. And Rita, what drove you to start Abad? Now, I thought we get a lot of awards, and folks, you can look at our awards, list of awards on our website, but Abad has been raking awards left, right, and center. You got the UNHCR Innovation Award in 2019, the Cannes Lions Award in 2017, the London International Award, the Silver Award, the Gulf IFI Award, the UN SDG Action Award, the Global Leader UN Generation Best Message Award in 2018, Honorary Shield for Amman Center in Qatar, the Gina Dar Best 10 Innovative Initiative, Best Message Award, Beirut Marathon Association 2018. So, Rida, what drove you and what drives you?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, maybe what made me like really consider starting Abad alongside my partner, she's also a lawyer, Danielle Hwayik, was actually people like Troy and Dave at the beginning. My background, my academic background, I'm a medical social worker and a clinical counselor. And I worked for 8 years before starting Abad, actually working with survivors themselves, of survivors of gender-based violence. So I provide the listening, case management, counseling. I work with the survivors, with those affected, the right holders themselves. For 8 years, actually, I was in that room where listening and supporting and working with those traumatized because of incidents of gender-based violence and sexual gender-based violence, varying from spousal violence to child marriage, early marriage, rape, trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation, those that were like really heavily affected. And in addition, of course, that was in the previous organization where I was also part of its co-founding. It's called CAFA organization, which means CAFA means enough. And for 8 years, while working with the survivors, also doing trainings, doing awareness, raising, sensitization, campaigning, working on advocacy, and so on. Actually, the women themselves were my eye opener, those affected, because constantly when I was working with them, I repeatedly was like, hearing that, okay, Rida, we know that violence is not okay. It's affecting us. It's affecting our family, our children. But why are you telling me this? Like, you need to do the counseling for my husband or for my father or brother, those who are actually using the violence and committing the violence. So as a young, like I was 28 years old back then, and I was like, yeah, that's true. As a public health practitioner, for me, the point is, as someone that is taking the cause at the heart of ending violence against women and girls, I really don't want to spend my my entire life and see maybe my children and grandchildren suffering with violence and actually not being able to achieve like a milestone where we can really say, as we do in our projects and theory of change, reducing gender-based violence in our society. So if we want to do that, we need to really work on root causes of gender-based violence, not only heal the bruises of those affected. I don't want to see a woman really suffering for anymore. I want to see my community, my society, where really having men and women living together in kind of equality, in kind of real partnership, not suffering with violence. And I was like, that's true. As a feminist movement in Lebanon, for years, since the 80s, the work on ending violence against women was mainly focused and addressing women, like kind of preaching converted people and working with those affected, but not really engaging men and boys. And while looking around, like really, we can have like real men champion and allies that they can work side by side, and men listen to men more than like actually women, especially under protection programming. And really, we need to shift our approaches and try a new model, a new approach in working on ending violence against women, which include working with men and boys and engaging men and boys. So establishing Abad stands, Abad in Arabic, it's dimensions, which is the systemic approach and the public health approach in working on gender equality, which is like starting an organization that actually work on the different layers of the system, really working on root causes in addition to working with survivors on specialized services. So dimension is the reflective of acknowledging that we have multidimensional causes that were leading to violence, and hence you need to work on multidimensional interventions on the different layers to be able to address the issue. And this is how, like, I was like, okay, I want to start a model organization that apply what we preach. If we believe in gender equality, we need to have like a gender equal organization as well. In our programs, we work with everyone. So we work on specialized services, but also the prevention, the advocacy, the policy reform, the capacity strengthening at the same time, and work on resources and so on and so forth. So if you want, for me, this is what makes me wake up daily, like really, and keep that passion. They are the women themselves that are dictating what they need and what they want us to work on.
Thank you. So when did you start, Abad? What year? And Troy, what year?
2011.
Okay, and
Yeah,
Troy, what year did you start Speak Up for the Poor?
I think we legally started it in 2004, but we really started operations about 2008, 9.
Okay.
Yeah, same with us. We got the IRS number in 2017, but we launched on January 8, 2019, because you need to build the infrastructure and have full capacity. Yeah. And you also received awards regarding involving the men in your programs, Rita, didn't you?
Sorry?
I believe you received an award with regards to that program where you engaged the men and the boys in. Yes. Troy, would you talk to us, please, about the impact of Speak Up for the Poor? Because my first conversation about Speak Up for the Poor was with Dave Palmer, and he described to me the programs that you have, both in education and other things. So what is the impact of your organization in Bangladesh?
So we have about 2,000 girls that are from 6th grade through university that are now part of our girls education program. So what we do is we, starting in 6th grade, girls join our program, and we provide all they need to stay in school, tutoring and all the school supplies and academic support. And we give them stipends and a dorm to stay in through university. So our idea is that there are schools, even though schools need improvement, but because girls will drop out and they won't be able to have a safe place to live even if they miraculously finish high school, we support them all the way through university. So we've had maybe 25 young women finish university. We have about 150 young women now in nursing school or college, university of some type. So these are all, when they were girls from villages where maybe 1-2% would even finish high school, maybe some better off villages 5%, but maybe 1 out of 100 would even go to higher education. So what we're trying to do is create in the villages and now in a few slums a culture where we hope that like 50% of the girls will finish 12th grade and then go on to a higher education. So we've just had about 3 or 4 years of small classes graduating, but now we're going to start having 15, 20 graduating from college every year, and perhaps even more 2 or 3 years from now. So that's what we're doing. And our greatest impact in those villages where there used to be a very high, in some villages, perhaps 80-90% child marriage rate, where now it might be 10 or 20% because all the girls are in our program and at least are staying in through at least 10th grade. Probably 80% of our girls are staying in through 10th grade, perhaps maybe 60-70% are finishing 12th grade, and almost half of our girls are going to go to higher education now. So that's a huge difference from these villages where basically no one in the past would go to higher education. So the purpose of that is not just that higher education solves everyone's problems, but it gives the girls something to shoot for. And then if they get through 11th and 12th grade, they're more likely to say, yeah, I have a vision for my life to be a nurse or teacher or whatever. And then they're going to delay marriage till after their education is done.
Thank you so much, Troy and Rita. And we know that usually parents marry their children off, especially girls, early because of many reasons. One of them is the lack of financial capacity and capability. They are poor and they say, hey, Some of them get a dowry for the young girl when she married. So that's an income for the family that they wouldn't have had if they didn't marry their daughter. Others, it's because of civil wars, conflict, migration because of climate change. We've also seen mass rapes as a political weapon, using girls and women's bodies as a political weapons in these civil conflicts in Africa and other parts of the world. So there are many reasons, but the end is the same, which is the traumatizing, the forced marriage of a child that should be enjoying her childhood, getting the education. And so at this time, I would like to encourage the audience to let us know if they have any questions. But as we know in the States, what I would like both of you to talk about, in the States, and we've worked with survivors of child marriage, they all indicated to us that, you know, they go through stages, isolation from school. Let me talk about the case of Sherry Johnson in Florida. And that was my first knowledge. And that was in 2016 that child marriage was legal in the US. All this time I thought it doesn't happen here, it only happens overseas. Basically, Sherry Johnson was repeatedly raped by a deacon and a parishioner in her church at age 10. Age 11, she became pregnant. Child welfare was going to conduct an investigation, show the church and the parents get together. They marry her off to the 20-year-old rapist. By 18, she found a friendly attorney. She had 7 kids. So she had no time. And this was an article written by Nicholas Kristof for the New York Times. The title was 11 Pregnant and Forced to Marry Her Rapist. So there was no time for her to go to school. She's isolated from society. As you know, she cannot drive, she cannot sign a contract. You cannot vote in the States until 18. You cannot sign a contract until you're 18. And if you're a victim of domestic violence, and there's a higher propensity when there's an age differential to become a victim of domestic violence, if you go to a shelter, they will turn you away because of liability reasons, because you're under 18. And that's what all the survivors we work with told us. And they steer them towards runaway shelters, but they can't go to a runaway shelter because they're married and they have kids. So most of them ended up on the street or in an apartment with no electricity, fearing every minute that the neighbors are going to report them to social welfare. There's a higher propensity of domestic violence because of the age differential, and 78 to 85% end up in divorce. How does that compare in both Lebanon and Bangladesh to what we have here in the US?
Go ahead.
Well, when it comes to Lebanon, as you wish, if you want to date. Troy?
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I don't know the exact divorce rate in Bangladesh. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that, but I do know that there, contrary to what people think, even about the conservative Muslim culture, there actually is a significant divorce rate. And what tends to happen, even teenage girls divorced when they're 16, because the guy was abusing them, or because they're not, the family's not providing enough dowry. Because actually in Bangladesh, similar to India too, the way the dowry system works, the family is paying the dowry. So they are paying the family to take their daughter. So it's actually different than selling your daughter. You're paying someone to take your daughter, so it drives a family into even deeper poverty. But there are a lot of divorce cases for young girls. We have many girls in our program that were married, divorced, and now we have them back in school. But what that does for the girls who are divorced across Bangladesh when they're still quite young, when you're 16 to 20 years old and you have a baby, but you have no education, many of those girls end up in prostitution because that's the only way to support themselves. So the brothels actually have a lot of women who were married as children, divorced, and then forced into prostitution as their only option. I don't know the actual divorce rate, but it certainly has a huge impact on girls.
Yeah, and actually similarly, and apologies also because we're struggling in Lebanon, with the internet connectivity. So apologies for turning off the camera just to stay connected with everyone. So similarly in Lebanon, unfortunately, we don't have exact statistics, data on when it comes to understanding the rate of like child marriage in general, like marriages under 18, or especially the issue of divorce. But when it comes to the coping mechanism, Rima, that you just listed, when it comes to why, the drivers are almost the same when it comes to like a kind of indirectly selling the daughter when you have the dowry, or like like it's a source of income. It's a source as well to elevate the economic burden on the family in light of the economic crisis. So pushing the girl into an early marriage is that kind of survival mode to adapt to be able to confront and accommodate for the economic crisis. But also one of the aspects that we're facing in the country is actually the legal text, the legal system. So in Lebanon, unfortunately, still under different confessions, which is under like under Muslim or Christian, under what we call the personal status code, the legal age of marriage is still quite low. In sense, like under few confessions, the legal age is still 8 years old or 9 years old. And in other words, and in other term, it's legal for the father and to push and marry the daughter. It's, for me, it's an indirect way. It's a legalized trafficking because you're selling, but it's legal because the law allowed that low age of marriage, young age of marriage. And at the same time, when it comes to implications afterward, yes, we're facing like the issue of domestic violence, marital rape that is happening, like a lot of challenges under reproductive health and rights in sense of complications with pregnancy and delivery, and that is also an issue. And there is like a certain number that are getting divorced as well, but not a high number are back to education system. So usually they go to other coping mechanism because of the implications, mental health implication, the health implication, the social implication, because in Lebanon, even the issue of being divorced is still a stigma and stigmatizing women and girls. So sometimes having resort to like commercial, like a kind of prostitution, or else especially to raise the kids if she has kids. But mostly the coping mechanisms are quite negative with substance abuse, or because of the mental health cost of being pushed at early age into marriage, in addition to the social and economic cost. Thank you, Rima.
Thank you so much to both of you. It appears that some of the people who signed up either did not get the email, or I was responding to them and sending them the Zoom link. You know, we were so busy with the program that of course I didn't get a chance to go into my emails. So hopefully I sent it to them, and hopefully they will join. But thank you, both of you. Is there, now that we're coming to the end of the program, I would like to again thank our major donor, Daryl Sheets, and would like to encourage all of you to donate. Ali Riza is going to put the donate link in the chat in order to continue to keep our programs going. And some of the impact that we had in Global Hope, which you can also see on our website, is that, you know, we raise awareness, educate to prevent future victims. And we personally interacted with over 400,000 individuals, including students, because I speak in front of schools, both private and public schools, interfaith groups, and all community organizations. We also sent cards and digital letter of over 7,000 to elected officials, both on the state and federal level, in order to urge them to end child marriage under 18, no exceptions. In the US, on the human trafficking side, we are advocating for increasing the penalty on the buyer, because as you know, sex trafficking is supply and demand. If we can reduce the demand, ergo the supply will be reduced. So if we increase the penalty on the buyer from misdemeanor to a felony, and increase the penalty on the trafficker from felony to a violent felony, so they can serve 85% of their time. Because while talking with chief of police in various cities, they will tell you that the victims of sex trafficking they don't always come as witness in order to arrest the trafficker or to file charges against the trafficker, because they control them by drugs and alcohol, and they threaten them, and also threatening them with bodily harm, not just them, but their family members. So they're always in fear, even that the trafficker went into jail, that ultimately they're going to come out soon enough and they're going to go after them. That's why there's the concern, and they do not come forth as far as providing evidence in order to either charge or put the trafficker or put them for a longer term in jail. If there are any questions from the audience, please let us know. And at this time, I would like to ask Troy, what is the closing statement that you'd like to make? What would you leave the audience here, both donors and attendees? And I know we have someone who's attending from the USC public, I'm trying to remember, one of my board members is the director of it, public human rights clinic at USC. And so what would you like to tell the audience here? What would you like to leave them with? And I also love to give them action items. I don't want people just to come and attend. We need to give them an action item. What is your closing statement?
Yeah, so again, thanks for having me. I would say that our organization is about educating and empowering girls to help them avoid situations of exploitation. And I would say, just in summary, working to empower girls who are vulnerable to exploitation is the best way you can change the world. And the reason is that because you're not only fighting one of the greatest evils that exist, sexual exploitation, commercial sexual exploitation, child marriage, human trafficking, but simultaneously, if you empower and educate girls, they themselves will be the change agents in their country. So empowering and educating girls is doing the two most important things simultaneously, which most social projects don't do. Most things just fight an evil, but empowering girls in poverty not only stops great suffering and exploitation, it empowers girls to themselves be what the country needs. So like here in Bangladesh, they talk about needing all these teachers and doctors and lawyers and future female police officers. And we not only can stop the evil of exploiting girls, we can give Bangladesh what the country needs to develop by educating these girls. So I would tell people that the greatest human rights issue in the world today is the exploitation of girls in poverty. But the solution to what the world needs is educating girls in poverty. So simultaneously, you're doing both those things. So it's a little bit late here, so I don't know if I was really articulate on that, but those two things happen simultaneously. It's like dealing with climate change. Not only is there a great, terrible thing that's happening, but there's great economic opportunity by working on climate change, if that makes sense. And that is exactly what happens when you empower girls in poverty. You fight great evil, but you also give the world what it needs, and a whole new wave of empowered and educated girls. So that's what we're trying to do. In terms of action items, of course, like we would love anyone to join our organization, but I would say, don't only be about educating yourself, but find one specific person or one specific organization and support that group, especially groups that educate and empower girls in poverty. And if you want to find one girl to connect with, talk to Dave. He's our fundraiser, and he'll connect you with one girl that you could support in our program. That would be a great action item in terms of supporting us. But if you don't want to support Speak Up, Rima, of course, people should support you, but I would say put your money behind your wherever your heart is.
Thank you, Troy. Rida?
Well, for me, is like through the learning as well. Like we need to always think of an integrated programming in sense. We need to think of the intersectionality between everything that is happening and really affecting women and girls in sense. Poverty, yes, but at the same time, thinking through inclusivity, thinking through the environment, thinking through like today with the shrinking of resources around the globe, and especially for the MENA region and Lebanon. Like we can't work in silos. We can't work each alone. We need to really think of how we can bring all our various sectors together in an integrated programming to be able to really best invest in available resources to ensure a real protection for women and girls and for them to live in dignity and ensure their well-being. Like for us, thinking of how we can ensure women and girls' autonomy, their sense of agency, like at least to live in dignity and have the right to choose in life. That's the most important. And that can only happen through like education, knowledge, and skills. Helping a girl in Lebanon, at least today, in really learning about how to say no to exploitation, how like to really use the minimal skills to be able to be self-independent. Autonomy is the key to be protected from all forms of sexual and gender-based violence. And that can only happen with knowledge and with like leveraging of opportunities where she can invest her skills and have some economic impact. For Abad, for us today, any kind of support generally to, especially our safe shelters, these are for these are form of life-saving service format for women and girls that are like really running away for their lives from being forced into a marriage or even fleeing a possible killing under the name of honor or else. For us, no matter what would happen under our work, no matter what would happen in the country with the economic crisis, for us, the commitment is no matter what is to continue at least providing emergency safe sheltering for any woman and girl in danger because of gender-based violence that are needing a place temporarily to stay, to reflect on their lives, to reflect on their options, and really resume their life away from violence. So any kind of in-kind even support for the shelter. Today, even the price of food to be put on the table is really insane. Any kind of solidarity with the shelters for women directly is really grateful. However, like generally speaking, spreading the awareness about the situation and pushing into the importance of education is quite would make a change in the life of women in the country.
Thank you so much to both of you. We were lucky that the internet connections both in Lebanon and Bangladesh worked.
Yeah.
So it must be the topic, and the universe wanted everyone to hear
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I see a question. Okay, so a question is, what city are you working, Rida, out of? She's working out of Beirut, Lebanon, and she wanted to know whether there are shelters in Beirut and how many, or Lebanon.
Yeah, so basically in Lebanon, we have shelters for women and for women affected, like they call them women in difficulties, or which are run by Mariam and Martha and Sisters of Good Shepherd, Ra'a Saleh, in the country. They're mainly in Mount Lebanon. You know, the exact address is always confidential, but they're located in the zone, like the governorate of Mount Lebanon. And also YWCA, the Young Women Christian Association, they have a kind of apartment as well for women that they are subject to gender-based violence, family and spousal violence. Also Caritas for migrant women, and Kafa Association also for those migrant and the survivors of trafficking, and also survival of like prostitution. For Abad, we have also a shelter in the north. We have one in Bekaa, and there's one also in Mount Lebanon. That can accommodate the women alongside with their children, because one of the challenges in the country was the issue of the inability of the woman to take her children with her if she wanna like go to a shelter. And also there were like a lack of secular shelters in the country. So what Abad started as 3 shelters are like secular, also for the mothers to have their children with them unconditionally, inclusively to any nationality, because some of the shelters also they don't accommodate any nationality, and also women that they have a history of prostitution or a history of mental health, of substance abuse, or if they have any mental health challenge. But for Abad, it's inclusive to all. However, the only condition is to be at high risk of GBV or subject to GBV. So generally, totally, we have today like 8 that they can serve women. They're quite sufficient in sense of number, let's say. They can really accommodate the need. Luckily, in Lebanon, we still have that family solidarity that also play a role as a kind of natural sheltering service. But for those in life-threatening situation, at least we have those of Abad, and for Kafa and Caritas, if I'm not mistaken, they're quite immediate response. The others are more like, for longer term sheltering and based on like, an assessment and consent with the women.
Thank you. There is one more question for you, Rida. And the question is Abad getting any physical threats because of
daily?
that you do?
Yes, actually, unfortunately, in Lebanon, we don't, we're not operating in a country where you can say that you have a very solid system in sense of security. You have the formal security, and you have the informal kind of parallel securities group based on different political parties. It's quite hard, especially with the diversity in the country. Many times when especially we have like women in the shelter coming from a certain political group or tribe or whatsoever, the only known address of the organization is the administrative office, which is in Beirut in Furnish-Shibak, which is where I sit actually. And this is on daily basis. Whenever you have someone that is hiding in the shelter, staying anonymously and confidentially, that we preserve no matter what. Usually if they know that possibly she might be at Abad, they would go directly to the main office at the administrative one, and they will ask for the person in charge, who is me, and then I will have the weapon in my head every other day, like a kind of being threats in sense of forcing to tell them where their wife is, or like to have her and her kids return. So far I'm still alive, I think. But yeah, we have the physical. We have sometimes the team being like followed to their houses. You have threatening calls, but we really are quite not only not care because we believe in what we do, but also we know how to deal like in the de-escalation. It comes to also dealing with angry men, like the angry violent men, and explain that she's there voluntarily. We work a lot on listening also to the men and try to work on some aspect of mediation. They know that we're against violence. We're not against men. And we're against patriarchy. We're not against fathers per se. So it's only about like really working together to be able to have like a healthy dynamic in the family. So we have that kind of reputation as well as Abad, that it's not about like, liberalism of women generally, or it's just about women rights, meaning that we're putting in the head of women that you need to leave your husbands. We're really there to work on the violent dynamic per se. And this is our mission, and this is our public health and also right-based intervention. So we have physical, like really serious physical threats sometimes. We have a good alliances with the police also in the neighborhood and municipalities and different religious and political groups. It's not easy, I would say, to do that kind of work in a context like Lebanon, but we do what we have to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rita. And thank you, Troy and Dave, for being here with us. I would also like to mention that we have, I know it's over 10, sorry, we went over the 10 mark, but I just want to plug our upcoming event, which is the 3K walk, 5K run to end child marriage and human trafficking. And I've put the link in the chat for you to register and or sponsor the event. Our first one was in February. It was very successful, and some of the attendees here joined it. Thank you for joining it. Please tell your friends and relatives and all your networks about this event, and let's make it a success. It's in Irvine. It's co-hosted by the mayor, again, Mayor Farah Khan, and there will be elected officials attending. There will be speakers who are survivors or collaborating organizations that we work with either in the child marriage and human trafficking arena. And again, thank you everyone for attending. We thank the speakers. I know it's
Thank you, Rima.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know it's a different time zone. Thank you for joining us Saturday night.
It's okay. This is for women and girls. We do everything, and thank you, Rima, and really like God bless you also for what you do, and Dave and Troy for women and girls around the globe.
Thank you.
Great to meet you as
Thank
well.
you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you, Lindsay.
Okay.
Diane, thank you for your question. That was very good.
Yeah, my daughter just married someone Lebanese, and I'll be in Beirut next year. So I thought maybe that's a good connection. She's 27, so
Be in touch when you're in town, huh?
Okay, yeah. I that's all I wanted to know. I didn't realize we're still on who's on the group anymore. I'm in my car, but
Troy. Sure,
Hold
Troy,
on.
Dave, and Rida, please put in your email address. If someone wants to connect with you, put in your email address there and phone number, and I will keep this going until you finish putting your email address and phone number there with the area code, so people, yes, can join you.
Yeah.
And
I had, Rima, just one thought that since there are some lawyers on here and you do a lot of policy work and stuff in the United States, when I worked for the district attorney, we prosecuted a lot of cases of prostitution cases. And many of these cases were young girls, like I wasn't in the minor court, but like with girls 18 to 21 who obviously were being exploited. And what they needed was a diversion program rather than being treated as criminals. And I don't know if the district attorney in Los Angeles County has improved that or not since then, but that would be a great thing for U.S. organizations to do more, to get attorneys to work with the district attorney to create diversion programs for young women being prosecuted. Because as you know, when you apply for a job, if you have what's considered a sex crime, you even have less ability to hide that when you report what your criminal history is. So when a girl that's only 19 gets prostitution on her record, it can be quite debilitating for her future for a number of reasons. So just a thought for lawyers out there, that's a great thing to do in the US to help create diversion programs for girls, young women to have an option rather than being prosecuted to get something to get that off their record.
Yes, there are a lot of diversion programs. And unfortunately, just like everything else, because we are in the raising awareness, education, and prevention, it's hard for us to apply for grants because contrary to what the other organizations who provide services to victims and survivors, they can say we help 200 survivors of human trafficking. They can quantify that. But when people ask us, how many people did you save from going into either child marriage or human trafficking, we cannot answer that question because we raise awareness and go through the red flags and advocate for change in order to prevent future victims. So we cannot come up with an exact number, but we can say we interacted with so many people to raise awareness. So it's the lack of funding because I collaborate with a few of them because whenever a survivor contacts us, either child marriage or human trafficking, we make the referrals. We work with the Bilateral Safety Corridor Coalition in San Diego. The district and attorney in San Diego County is phenomenal as far as human trafficking. Her name is Samar Stefan. She has rolled out human trafficking prevention programs in all public schools in San Diego County. And that's because of basically a donation from the UBS Foundation, and it was for $2 million. So she rolled it out in all public schools. We're trying to fundraise for such a program in both Orange County and LA County. And the first one is around 750,000. LA County is 950,000. And that will be in compliance with Assembly Bill 1227. To answer the other part of your question, Troy, is that there's still ongoing training as far as law enforcement is concerned to shift from prostitution criminal to victim provide exit, trauma-informed exit strategies to include mental health and housing. And so that's what we're advocating for. And I also have a quarterly conference call with our Attorney General's office, Rob Bonta, and we meet with his human trafficking members of his human trafficking unit. And I have our collaborating agencies report about what they're seeing in the ground. And we go from all the way from Northern California to San Diego, and each county gives the report of what they're seeing on the ground. And I won't go into details about SB 357, which just passed and signed by the governor. It's the worst thing that ever happened to victims of human trafficking. Unfortunately, legislators introduced legislation that has unintended consequences, and this one is one of them. It ends up victimizing the victims again.
Yeah, that's what often happens.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah,
So,
sounds like you're on these things. I just know when I was a new prosecutor, there were several cases where if I just had someone to call and say, hey, I'm prosecuting this case, this girl's 19, let's get her into this safe home or something rather than prosecuting the case, it would have been so helpful. So there's just massive opportunities, especially in LA County.
Yeah, there's ongoing education with law enforcement.
Yeah.
To shift from, charging to providing exit strategies. Thank you for asking that very important question. It was very interesting to hear about the work on the ground, the facts on the ground and the work on the ground in both Lebanon and Bangladesh. And thank you all for attending. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely weekend.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.